A struggling family adopts a weird dog they find shivering by the road, just trying to do something good for once. But from the first night, something feels off. It doesn't bark. It doesn't eat. It just watches. When they finally take it to the vet, the doctor scans the chip, goes pale, and shouts, "Call 911!" Suddenly, the family's small act of kindness becomes the start of a nightmare. Police swarm their home. A black truck starts showing up outside. And that dog? It isn't what anyone thought it was. Every move it makes seems too precise, too trained, like it remembers something it's not supposed to. Now the family must decide. Keep the creature that's protecting them, or uncover the secret that could destroy them. What was the vet really afraid of? And what happens when the truth behind that dog finally comes out? I'd love to know. Where are you watching from? Type it down below. And while you're here, subscribe so you'll always catch the next story. The windshield wipers fought against the heavy rain as Corinne Lyle drove home from her evening shift at the Mountain Vista Motel. Her shoulders ached from changing sheets and scrubbing bathrooms, but she couldn't slow down, not with Amos and Tilda waiting at home. The dark country road twisted through the Colorado foothills, slick with early spring storm water. A flash of movement caught her eye. Something dark stumbling near a drainage ditch. Corinne's foot eased off the gas pedal. Common sense said to keep driving, but something about the creature's halting gait tugged at her heart. With a sigh, she pulled onto the muddy shoulder and grabbed the flashlight from her glove compartment. "Hello?" she called out, beam of light cutting through the rain. The figure froze, then turned. A large dog, soaked to the skin, favoring its left hind leg. Its eyes caught the flashlight beam and reflected an odd amber color. "It's okay," Corinne said softly, crouching down despite the mud seeping into her work pants. "I won't hurt you." The dog, if that's what it was, studied her with an unsettling intensity. No tail wagging, no whining, just that steady, measuring gaze. It took a careful step closer. "That's it," she encouraged. "Let me help you." Up close, she could see its coat was a mottled gray-brown, marked with old scars that spoke of a hard life. The animal allowed her to approach, but maintained a watchful stillness that raised the hair on her neck. Still, she couldn't leave it here in the storm. "Come on then," she said, opening the back door of her tired Honda Civic. "Let's get you somewhere warm." The creature hesitated, then smoothly climbed in, movements precise despite its injury. It settled in the middle of the seat, spine straight, eyes fixed forward like a soldier at attention. The drive home took 15 minutes, during which her unusual passenger never relaxed its vigilant posture. Corinne found herself glancing in the rearview mirror, unsettled by how the animal seemed to be memorizing every turn of the road. When she pulled into the gravel driveway of their small rental house, warm light spilled from the windows. The front door flew open before she could even cut the engine. "Mom!" 9-year-old Tilda bounded down the front steps, blonde curls flying. "You're late! We were worried!" "Inside, Tilda," 15-year-old Amos called from the doorway, arms crossed. "It's pouring." Corinne smiled, despite her exhaustion. "I'm fine. Just got delayed. And I found someone who needs our help." The back door opened, and the dog emerged, each movement deliberate. It paused on the gravel, scanning the yard's perimeter before focusing on the children. Tilda gasped in delight. "A dog! Can we keep it? Please?" But Amos's posture stiffened. "Mom, something's not right about it. Look at how it's standing." The animal's head swiveled toward Amos, and Corinne saw what her son meant. Its stance was too calculated, its attention too focused. When Tilda took a step forward, it shifted slightly, positioning itself between the girl and the dark tree line beyond their yard. "It's hurt," Corinne said firmly, though uncertainty gnawed at her. "We can't leave it out here. Let's get inside where it's dry and we'll figure things out." The creature followed them into the house, limping but alert. While Tilda chattered excitedly about possible names, it methodically surveyed each room they passed. Corinne watched as it noted windows, doors, sight lines, almost like it was mapping escape routes. "Look how it checks everything out," Tilda said. "It's so smart." "Too smart," Amos muttered. He hadn't taken his eyes off their new guest. "Mom, normal dogs don't act like this." Corinne couldn't argue with that. When she tried traditional dog commands, "Sit, stay, come," the animal simply watched her, head tilted slightly as if puzzling out her intent. But when she gestured sharply with her hand, it responded instantly, moving with military precision. "See?" Tilda demonstrated, making a chopping motion toward the floor. The creature immediately dropped into a crouch. "It knows hand signals." "Where did it learn those?" Amos demanded. "Mom, this isn't some lost pet. Something weird is going on." "What's going on is that it's hurt and needed help," Corinne said with more confidence than she felt. "After everything we've been through this year, maybe we could use something good in our lives, even if it's temporary." She didn't add what they all knew, that since losing their father 18 months ago, good things had been hard to come by. The motel job barely covered rent and groceries. Amos had grown serious beyond his years, while Tilda's normally bright spirit showed cracks of anxiety. "We'll take it to Dr. Martinez tomorrow," Corinne continued, watching the animal pace the living room. "For now, let's get it dried off and fed." But their guest showed no interest in the towels or bowl of leftover stew they offered. Instead, it completed its inspection of the house before taking up position in the hallway, a spot that offered clear views of both the front door and the children's bedroom doors. "It's protecting us," Tilda whispered excitedly. Amos frowned. "Or keeping us contained." "Enough," Corinne said. "Bedtime, both of you. School tomorrow." As she tucked Tilda in, her daughter pointed to a particularly prominent scar across the creature's shoulder, visible even through its thick fur. "How did it get hurt, Mom?" "I don't know, sweetie." Corinne smoothed back Tilda's curls. "But it's safe now." "We'll help it get better, right? Like how we're getting better?" Corinne's throat tightened. "That's right. Sometimes healing just takes time." In Amos's room, her son sat on the edge of his bed, still fully dressed. "Mom, I know you're trying to do something nice for us, but that thing, it's not normal. The way it looks at us, how it moves, it's like it's trained for something." "I hear you," Corinne said quietly. "And we'll be careful. But right now it needs help, and we can give that. Isn't that worth something?" Amos's shoulders slumped slightly. "Just promise you'll listen if things get weird? I can't lose. I mean, we need to stay safe." Corinne hugged him, feeling the tension in his lanky frame. At 15, he carried too much worry for someone so young. "I promise. Now get some sleep." But sleep proved elusive for Corinne. She lay awake, listening to the rain and the steady click of the creature's claws as it patrolled the hallway. Every so often, it would pause outside each bedroom door, as if taking inventory of their breathing. Around midnight, she got up to check on it. The animal stood at attention in its chosen spot, amber eyes gleaming in the dark. As she watched, it shifted slightly, adjusting its position until it had optimal sight lines to every entry point. "What are you?" Corinne whispered. The creature met her gaze with that same unnerving focus. In its eyes, she saw intelligence, purpose, and something else that sent a shiver down her spine. Recognition, as if it understood far more than any animal should. Heading back to bed, Corinne pulled out her phone and scheduled a vet appointment for the following afternoon. Whatever mysteries surrounded their unusual guest, the practical concerns of its injury needed addressing first. She tried to ignore the nagging feeling that by bringing this creature home, she'd set something bigger in motion. In the hallway, the steady cadence of pacing resumed. Through her bedroom door, Corinne could almost imagine a sentinel standing guard, measuring the night in precise footsteps, watching, waiting. For what, she didn't know. But as she finally drifted off to sleep, one certainty remained. Nothing about this dog was what it seemed. The rain continued to fall outside, washing away the tracks that led to their door. Inside, in the darkness of the hallway, amber eyes kept their vigil, counting heartbeats, monitoring breaths, guarding secrets that had followed paw prints home from a storm-swept road into the warmth of the Lyle family's wounded, healing heart. The morning sun cast long shadows across Dr. Ward Ellison's veterinary clinic as Corinne guided her unusual guest through the door. The animal moved with military precision despite its limp, scanning the waiting room methodically. "Good morning," the receptionist called out, then froze mid-greeting as she took in the size of their visitor. "Oh my!" Tilda bounced ahead, her blonde curls catching the light. "He's really nice. We found him in the rain." Dr. Ellison emerged from an exam room, his tall frame filling the doorway. His neat beard couldn't hide the surprise that flickered across his face. "This must be the emergency case." He crouched down, studying the animal with practiced eyes. "Definitely some wolf content there. How long have you had him?" "Just since last night," Corinne explained, suddenly self-conscious about her rushed decision to bring home a strange animal. "I found him in a drainage ditch during the storm." Tilda tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Show him what he can do, Mom. The hand things." "Hand things?" Dr. Ellison raised an eyebrow. "He responds to signals," Corinne said. "We noticed it last night." Before anyone could stop her, Tilda raised her arm and made a sharp chopping motion downward, a gesture she'd seen work before. The animal immediately dropped into a perfect down position, eyes locked on the little girl. Dr. Ellison's professional demeanor shifted. "That's unusual. Military-grade training, from the looks of it." He straightened up. "Let's get him into the exam room. Sarah, hold all my other appointments for a bit." The exam room felt cramped with the massive animal inside. It submitted to Dr. Ellison's examination without protest, though its amber eyes never stopped tracking their movements. "The limp seems to be from a minor sprain, nothing serious," Dr. Ellison reported as his hands moved expertly over the muscled frame. "But these scars..." He traced the lines across the animal's flank. "Some are surgical, and here..." He parted the thick fur at the neck, revealing a small, healed incision. "That's where a tracking chip would be." He reached for his scanner, passing it over the area. The device beeped, and Dr. Ellison's face went slack as he read the display. All color drained from his features. "What is it?" Corinne asked, her heart beginning to race. "This..." He swallowed hard. "This is Kestrel 7. There's a federal alert attached to this ID." His hand reached for the clinic phone. "I have to call 911, right now." "What? Why?" Corinne stepped between him and the phone. "He hasn't done anything wrong." "Mrs. Lyle," Dr. Ellison's voice was gentle but firm. "This animal is connected to an active investigation, a child abduction case." The words hit Corinne like a physical blow. Tilda pressed against her. Sighed, small fingers gripping her mother's jacket. "But he's been protecting us," Tilda protested. "He watches our doors all night." The call was already going through. Within minutes, 2 deputy vehicles screamed into the parking lot, lights flashing. The deputies burst in with hands on their weapons, ordering everyone back from the animal. "Stand clear, ma'am," the senior deputy commanded. "This is a quarantine situation." Corinne felt her face burning with humiliation as curious onlookers gathered outside the clinic windows. She'd thought she was doing something good, something kind, and instead, she'd brought danger right to her children's doorstep. "Please," she said, her voice cracking. "He hasn't shown any aggression. He's been watching over my kids." "That's what they're trained to do, ma'am," the deputy replied. "Watch, track. These aren't pets. They're weapons with teeth." Dr. Ellison stepped forward. "I'll handle the quarantine personally," he assured both Corinne and the deputies. "We have secure facilities here, and I'll call you immediately if we learn anything more," he added softly to Corinne. Tilda began to cry, and Corinne gathered her close. "I know, baby. I know." She looked at Kestrel 7, sitting perfectly still amid the chaos, those intelligent eyes fixed on her family. One night, they'd had one night of feeling like something special had entered their lives, like maybe their luck was changing. "Mrs. Lyle," Dr. Ellison touched her arm. "You should take Tilda home now. I promise I'll keep you informed." Nodding numbly, Corinne guided her daughter toward the door. As they stepped outside into the harsh morning light, movement caught her eye. A black pickup truck idled across the street, its driver partially hidden behind tinted windows. But she could feel the weight of that unseen gaze, measuring, calculating. The truck remained there as she helped Tilda into their car, started the engine, and pulled away from the clinic. Her hands shook on the steering wheel. In the rearview mirror, she watched the black pickup pull out unhurriedly into traffic, following at a distance that might have seemed coincidental, if she believed in coincidences anymore. "Mom?" Tilda's voice was small in the back seat. "Is Kestrel 7 bad?" Corinne met her daughter's eyes in the mirror. "I don't know, sweetheart, but I think there's a lot more going on than we understand." The morning sun felt colder now, its light revealing too much, leaving nowhere to hide from the reality that their simple act of kindness had drawn them into something far larger and more dangerous than a stray dog in a storm. The deputies' boots scraped against the clinic's linoleum floor as they approached with clipboards and stern expressions. Their shadows fell across Corinne as she stood with her children, trying to maintain composure while her world tilted sideways. "Ma'am, we need you to sign these quarantine acknowledgments," the older deputy said, thrusting papers at her. His badge read, "Deputy Morris." "There's liability waivers too. Can't have you claiming damages if this turns ugly." Corinne's hands trembled as she took the stack of forms. The fluorescent lights seemed too bright, making everything harsh and clinical. Through the exam room window, she could see Kestrel 7 sitting perfectly still, those amber eyes fixed on her family. "What exactly are we dealing with here?" she asked, gripping her pen tightly. Deputy Morris's face hardened. "That's classified information, ma'am. All you need to know is that animal's connected to an ongoing federal investigation. You did right bringing it in, but now you need to step back and let the proper authorities handle this." The younger deputy shuffled uncomfortably. "Look, Mrs. Lyle, just sign the forms and take your kids home. The less you know about this, the better." Tilda pressed closer to Corinne's side, while Amos stood rigid, his jaw clenched. The boy had been silent since the revelation about Kestrel, but Corinne could feel anger radiating off him in waves. She signed where indicated, her signature looking foreign and shaky. Each page felt like another brick in a wall being built between her family and the truth. "Here," she said, handing back the clipboard. "Now what?" "Now you go home and forget about this," Deputy Morris replied flatly. Dr. Ellison will handle the quarantine procedures. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. The dismissal stung. Corinne gathered her children and headed for the exit, feeling the weight of multiple gazes on her back. The deputies, the clinic staff, and those unblinking amber eyes from the exam room. The morning sun hit them like a spotlight as they emerged onto the sidewalk. That's when Corinne saw it again, the black pickup truck, creeping past the clinic at a deliberately slow pace. The driver's features were shadowed behind the tinted windshield, but she recognized the vehicle as belonging to Royce Bracken, the wealthy rancher whose property sprawled across half the county. Amos saw it, too. "Mom," he whispered urgently, "that's Bracken's truck." "I know," she murmured back, hustling them toward their car. "Don't stare." The pickup completed its lazy pass and disappeared around the corner, but Corinne couldn't shake the feeling of being watched. She helped Tilda into the back seat while Amos claimed the front, his lanky frame radiating tension. The drive home to their small motel unit felt longer than usual. Corinne checked the rearview mirror constantly, half expecting to see the black truck materialize behind them. Her mind raced with questions. Why would someone like Royce Bracken take an interest in their situation? What was Kestrel 7 really? And why did everything about this feel wrong? Their motel unit looked smaller and shabbier than ever when they pulled up. The morning's events had stripped away the brief magic of the previous night, when they'd felt like a family who'd found something special. Inside, Tilda went straight to the corner where Kestrel's makeshift bed lay empty. She picked up the old blanket they'd given him, hugging it to her chest. "When can we get him back?" she asked in a small voice. Corinne knelt beside her daughter, choosing her words carefully. "After the procedures are done, sweetheart. Dr. Ellison needs to make sure Kestrel is healthy and safe." "He is safe," Tilda insisted. "He protected us all night." "I know he did." Corinne smoothed her daughter's wild curls. "And we're going to try to protect him too, okay? By being patient and letting Dr. Ellison help him." Amos made a harsh sound from across the room. "We should never have brought him here. Now we're mixed up in something bad. I can feel it." "Hey." Corinne stood and approached her son. "Nothing bad is going to happen to us. We did the right thing, helping an injured animal." "Did we?" Amos challenged. "Because those deputies sure didn't act like we did something good. And Bracken doesn't cruise by here for fun, Mom. He owns half this town." "Lower your voice," Corinne warned, glancing at Tilda. "Look, I know this is scary, but Dr. Ellison will figure this out. Did you see his face when he scanned that chip? That wasn't someone playing games. He was genuinely shocked." She moved to the kitchenette, going through the motions of making lunch, trying to create a sense of normalcy. But her mind kept replaying the scene at the clinic. Ellison's color draining as he read the scanner, the genuine concern in his eyes when he'd promised to keep them informed. Whatever was happening, she sensed he was as unsettled by it as she was. The afternoon dragged by. Corinne tried to focus on routine tasks, helping Tilda with homework, reviewing bills, preparing for her evening shift at the motel. But every passing car made her tense, and the windows seemed to hold too many shadows. As evening approached, she stood at the sink washing dishes, staring out at the parking lot. The events of the past 24 hours felt surreal. A dog that wasn't quite a dog. Federal alerts, child abductions. And now Royce Bracken's attention, heavy as storm clouds on the horizon. Something clicked in her mind as she dried her hands. Kestrel hadn't just stumbled into their lives by accident. The way it had assessed their unit that first night, checking sight lines and exits, how it positioned itself to watch both the door and the children's rooms, its response to hand signals. This was a trained animal, and somehow, some way, it had chosen them. The realization sent a chill down her spine. She glanced at her children, Tilda drawing at the coffee table, Amos pretending to read while actually watching the parking lot. They were all she had in the world. And now they were tangled in something much bigger than a simple rescue. Back at the clinic, Kestrel 7 sat in his quarantine kennel, silent but watchful. Dr. Ellison noticed how the animal's gaze never wavered from the window facing the road, the direction of the Lyles motel unit, like it was still on guard, still protecting, even from behind bars. The vet made careful notes about the animal's behavior, but his thoughts kept returning to Corinne Lyle's face as she'd left that morning, determined despite her fear, unwilling to simply walk away. He respected that kind of quiet courage. A black pickup cruised past the clinic for the third time that day. Ellison watched it disappear into the gathering dusk, his unease growing. Whatever was really going on here, the Lyles had stumbled into something dangerous, and somehow, he suspected, Kestrel 7 knew exactly what that danger was. In her motel unit, Corinne finished the dishes and began preparing for her night shift. She tried to focus on practical matters, bills to pay, schedules to juggle, her children's needs to meet, but her mind kept circling back to those amber eyes, that unwavering focus, and the growing certainty that nothing about this situation was random. The question wasn't whether Kestrel had found them on purpose. The question was why. Tilda sat cross-legged on the motel room floor, her coloring book forgotten beside her. Her eyes kept drifting to the spot where Kestrel had spent most of his time the night before, a worn patch of carpet near the corner. The wolf dog had paced there repeatedly, pausing to stare at the same spot over and over. "What are you looking at, Squirt?" Amos asked, glancing up from his homework. "Kestrel liked this spot," Tilda said, crawling over to examine the carpet more closely. "He kept sniffing right here, where it's all torn up." Amos sighed, but set his textbook aside. He probably just smelled mice or something. "No." Tilda ran her small fingers along the frayed carpet seam. "He was trying to tell us something. I could see it in his eyes." "You and Mom with the eyes thing," Amos muttered, but he joined his sister on the floor. "What's so special about this spot anyway?" Tilda tugged at the loose carpet edge. "Help me pull it back?" "Mom will kill us if we wreck the carpet more than it already is." "Please?" Tilda gave him her best puppy dog eyes. "Just a little peek?" Amos hesitated, then nodded. Together they carefully pulled back the torn section of carpet. Underneath, one of the floorboards looked different from the others, slightly lighter in color, with tiny scratch marks around the edges. "Look!" Tilda pointed excitedly. "It's loose!" Amos ran his fingers along the board's edge and found a spot where it lifted slightly. With careful pressure, the board came free, revealing a small, dark space underneath. "There's something in there," Tilda whispered, reaching in before Amos could stop her. She pulled out two objects, a small brass key, tarnished with age, and a strip of cloth about 6 inches long. "What is it?" Amos asked, taking the cloth piece. Numbers and letters were carefully stitched into the fabric in neat rows, forming what looked like a grid pattern. The stitching was precise, but showed signs of wear, as if the cloth had been handled many times. "We should show Mom," Tilda said, clutching the key. "Wait." Amos studied the cloth more carefully. "This isn't just random numbers. It looks like coordinates, maybe? Like on a map?" The front door opened, making them both jump. Corinne entered, still in her motel uniform, looking tired but alert. "Mom!" Tilda scrambled up, nearly tripping over her coloring book. "Look what we found! Kestrel knew it was here?" Corinne's expression shifted from confusion to concern as her children showed her their discovery. She took the cloth strip, running her fingers over the stitched numbers. "Where exactly did you find these?" Amos pointed to the lifted floorboard. Tilda noticed Kestrel kept focusing on this spot. The carpet was already torn, so we looked underneath. Corinne sat heavily in the nearest chair, examining the items. "This key looks old, but it's been used recently. See the scratch marks on it?" She turned to the cloth. "And these numbers, they're too precise to be random." "What should we do?" Amos asked, his earlier skepticism giving way to curiosity. Corinne was quiet for a long moment, then stood decisively. "We take these to Dr. Ellison. He's the only one who seemed genuinely concerned about Kestrel, and he might recognize what these numbers mean." "Now?" Tilda asked hopefully. "Now." Corinne grabbed her keys. "Get your jackets." The drive to the veterinary clinic was tense with anticipation. The sun was setting, painting the Colorado mountains in deep purple shadows. Corinne kept checking her rearview mirror, but there was no sign of Bracken's black pickup. The clinic's "closed" sign was lit, but warm light spilled from the back windows. Corinne knocked on the side door, and after a moment, Dr. Ellison appeared. His expression changed from surprise to interest when he saw who it was. "Mrs. Lyle, is everything all right?" "We found something," she said quietly. "Something I think you should see." He let them in, leading them to his office rather than the exam room. Kestrel's holding kennel was visible through the window, and Tilda pressed her face to the glass, waving at the wolf dog. The animal's ears perked forward, its amber eyes intense. Corinne laid the cloth strip and key on Ellison's desk. "These were hidden under our floor. Kestrel kept drawing attention to that spot." Ellison picked up the cloth, his face growing still as he studied the numbers. "I've seen something like this before," he said slowly. "On wildfire maps." "Wildfire maps?" He turned to his computer, typing quickly. "About 8 months ago, there was a string of suspicious fires in the national forest. A special investigator was brought in. She had a unique approach, using trained animals to detect accelerants and track scent patterns." "A trained animal like Kestrel?" Amos asked. Ellison nodded. "Exactly like Kestrel. In fact," he looked through the window at the wolf dog. "I'm almost certain it was Kestrel 7. The name fell from his lips like a remembered password, familiar and weighted with meaning. "What happened to the investigator?" Corinne asked, though something in her stomach told her she already knew. "She disappeared." Ellison's voice was grim. "Right after finding evidence that the fires weren't random accidents. The same week, one of Bracken's ranch hands reported his son missing. The cases were never solved." "And these numbers?" Corinne touched the cloth strip. "Grid coordinates," Ellison confirmed. "The investigation team used them to mark specific locations, places where evidence was found, where the fires started." He paused. "Places Kestrel was trained to remember." Tilda pressed closer to the window. "He was trying to tell us something." "Yes," Ellison said softly. "I think he was." "That's why he chose us," Corinne realized. "He didn't just wander into that ditch. He was looking for someone who would help." "Someone who would listen," Amos added, looking at his sister. Through the window, Kestrel 7 sat alert in his kennel, his gaze steady and knowing. In the growing darkness, his amber eyes seemed to glow with purpose, as if confirming what they'd all begun to suspect. This was just the beginning of what he needed to show them. The morning sun had barely crested the mountains when Corinne pulled into the gravel lot behind Ellison's clinic. Her fingers drummed nervously on the steering wheel as she watched him lock up, a backpack slung over his shoulder. The coordinates from the cloth strip felt like they were burning a hole in her pocket. "I made some calls last night," Ellison said as he climbed into her passenger seat. Got hold of Marcus Chen. He was a smoke jumper for 20 years before his knee gave out. If anyone can make sense of these grid markings, it's him. Corinne nodded, putting the car in drive. And the maps? Jenny Whitaker's working dispatch tonight. She owes me a favor from when I treated her daughter's horse. She'll pull the archived fire survey maps from that period. They drove in thoughtful silence through the waking town. Early morning fog clung to the valleys, and frost sparkled on the fence posts. Corinne couldn't shake the feeling that every minute counted now. Marcus Chen lived in a small cabin on the outskirts of town. Despite the early hour, smoke already curled from his chimney. He met them on the porch, leaning on a carved walking stick, his weathered face creasing into a smile. "Ward," he said warmly, then turned to Corinne. "And you must be Mrs. Lyle. Come in. Coffee's hot." Inside, the cabin was neat but lived in, with topographical maps covering one entire wall. Marcus settled into a worn armchair, examining the cloth strip through reading glasses. "These are definitely fire grid coordinates," he confirmed, tracing the stitches. "But they're using an older system, one we phased out about 5 years ago. Whoever marked these knew what they were doing." "Can you translate them?" Corinne asked. Marcus nodded, already reaching for a map. "Give me an hour. Ward, you know where the coffee is." While Marcus worked, Ellison filled Corinne in on the plan. They'd pick up Kestrel from the clinic. His quarantine officially ended that morning, and follow the coordinates into the hills. Jenny would have the historical maps ready by then, giving them a better picture of the area during the time of the fires. "What aren't you telling me?" Corinne asked quietly, noting the tension in Ellison's shoulders. He sighed. "The area we're heading into. It borders Bracken's ranch. If Kestrel's previous handler was investigating something connected to those fires, then we might be walking into the same thing she was investigating," Corinne finished. An hour later, Marcus had translated the coordinates into a clear route. "The main point seems to be here," he said, tapping a spot on the map. "There used to be an observation post there, used during fire season, but it burned down in one of those suspicious fires 8 months ago." They thanked Marcus and headed to the clinic. Kestrel was waiting, alert and focused, as if he knew exactly what they were planning. The moment they opened his kennel, he padded straight to Corinne's car and sat by the back door. Their next stop was the sheriff's dispatch center, where Jenny Whitaker slipped them a thick envelope during her break. "These are all the survey maps from that period," she whispered, "and incident reports. Be careful with these. They're supposed to be archived." The drive into the hills was tense. Kestrel sat upright in the back seat, his amber eyes fixed on the road ahead. As they climbed higher, the paved road gave way to gravel, then to a rough Forest Service track. "This is where we start walking," Ellison said, consulting Marcus's directions. They parked in a small clearing and let Kestrel out. The wolf dog immediately took point, moving with purpose along the overgrown trail. Every few minutes he would stop, nose testing the air, ears swiveling to catch any sound from the valleys below. The climb was steep, and Corinne was grateful for the hiking boots she'd borrowed from her daughter. Ellison walked beside her, one hand often reaching out to steady her on the rough terrain. Above them, Kestrel picked his way surely through the undergrowth, pausing occasionally to ensure they were following. After an hour of hiking, they reached a small plateau. The remains of the observation post stood stark against the sky, blackened beams and collapsed walls telling a story of intense heat. Kestrel circled the ruins, his movements precise and deliberate. "Look at this," Ellison called. He was examining a metal housing unit mounted on a surviving post. "It's a wildlife camera, the kind used to track animal movements during fires." Corinne joined him, noting how the housing had been pried open. "The memory card's gone." "Not just gone," Ellison said grimly. Look at these marks. Someone took it forcibly. Recently, too, or these scratch marks would have rusted. They searched the area methodically. The fire damage was extensive, but oddly contained. As Corinne studied the pattern of char marks, something felt wrong. "This wasn't random," she said slowly. "Look how the burn pattern radiates from specific points, like it was set deliberately to destroy certain areas." "Someone trying to erase evidence," Ellison agreed. But of what? Kestrel had moved to the edge of the plateau, his posture rigid with attention. His ears were pricked forward, focused on the winding road far below. Something in his alertness made Corinne's skin prickle. "We should document everything before we leave," she said, pulling out her phone to take photos. "The camera housing, the burn patterns." "The tire tracks," Ellison added, pointing to clear marks in the mud near the post's foundation. "Someone's been up here recently. Those are fresh." They worked quickly, photographing everything that seemed significant. Kestrel maintained his vigil, occasionally glancing back at them as if urging them to hurry. The sun was high overhead when they finished, casting stark shadows across the burned remnants of the post. Looking down at the valley below, Corinne could see why this location had been chosen for observation. It commanded a clear view of both the national forest and the sprawling acreage of Bracken's ranch. "We need to go," Ellison said softly, touching her arm. "We've got what we came for." Corinne nodded, but her mind was racing. The gutted camera, the precise burn patterns, the fresh tire tracks. It all pointed to someone actively working to hide something. And whatever it was, it had cost at least one person their life. Kestrel led them down a different path than they'd come up, his movements quick but cautious. Every few minutes he would stop, testing the air before proceeding. It was clear he wasn't just leading them back to the car, he was ensuring they weren't followed. The evidence they'd gathered felt heavy in Corinne's backpack. Photos of deliberate destruction, maps showing suspicious patterns, coordinates stitched by someone who knew they might not be able to deliver them in person. Whatever story Kestrel was trying to help them uncover, it was far from over. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the mountain road as Corinne steered her old sedan down the winding switchbacks. Her hands were tight on the wheel, knuckles white with tension. In the passenger seat, Ward Ellison studied the photos on his phone, occasionally glancing in the side mirror. Kestrel sat alert in the back, his amber eyes fixed on the road behind them. "That observation post was no accident," Ellison said, breaking the heavy silence. "Someone went to a lot of trouble to—" His words cut off as bright headlights suddenly flooded their rearview mirror. The glare was blinding, filling the car's interior with harsh white light. Corinne squinted, trying to maintain her focus on the narrow road ahead. "They're coming up fast," Ellison warned, twisting in his seat to look back. The vehicle behind them was a black pickup truck, its grille massive in their mirror. As it drew closer, Corinne could make out the distinctive dents in its front bumper. She'd seen that same truck idling outside the vet clinic. "It's Ludo Cass," she said, her voice tight. "Bracken's foreman." The truck surged forward, nearly touching their back bumper. Corinne's hands clenched harder on the steering wheel as she navigated another sharp turn. The road here was barely wide enough for two vehicles, with a steep drop-off on one side and a rock face on the other. They approached the old steel bridge that spanned Cooper's Canyon. The narrow structure was barely wide enough for a single vehicle, with rusty guardrails that had seen better days. Corinne had just guided the sedan onto the bridge when Ludo made his move. The impact came with a deafening crunch of metal. The truck slammed into their rear quarter panel, sending the sedan skidding sideways. Corinne fought the wheel, trying to keep them straight as Ludo's truck ground against their side, pushing them toward the guardrail. "Hold on!" she shouted as another impact rocked the car. The screech of metal on metal filled the air. Sparks flew as the sedan's passenger side scraped along the bridge's guardrail. In the back seat, Kestrel's muscles bunched, his eyes locked on the threat behind them. The next hit was harder. Glass exploded as the rear window shattered. In that same instant, Kestrel launched himself through the broken window like a missile. His powerful body crashed into Ludo's windshield with tremendous force, spreading a spiderweb of cracks across the glass. Ludo's truck swerved violently, fishtailing on the narrow bridge. The headlights swung wild arcs through the growing darkness as he fought for control. The pressure on Corinne's car suddenly released as the truck fell back. "Don't stop," Ellison urged, though Corinne was already pressing the gas pedal to the floor. Their damaged car lurched forward, metal shrieking where the crumpled panels dragged. In the rearview mirror, she could see Kestrel running after them, keeping pace despite the steep grade. Ludo's truck had fallen far behind, its headlights dim pinpoints in the gathering dusk. "The hospital's closest," Ellison said, pulling out his phone. "I'll call ahead." Corinne nodded, unable to speak past the knot in her throat. Her arms were shaking with delayed reaction, but she kept the car steady as they descended the last few miles into town. The emergency room parking lot was quiet when they pulled in. Kestrel appeared from the shadows moments later, moving with the same fluid grace despite the violence of his earlier attack. Ellison did a quick check of the wolf dog, while Corinne inspected the damage to her car. The entire passenger side was scraped raw, the Chia back end crumpled like an accordion. "He seems okay," Ellison said, running his hands carefully over Kestrel's body. "But there's something I need to show you." Under the harsh parking lot lights, he parted the fur along Kestrel's flank, revealing a long, well-healed scar. "Remember that federal flag in his chip data? There's more to it than just an alert. This scar, it's from a subdermal evidence pouch. They're used sometimes with specialized animals in federal investigations, a secure way to transport sensitive material in the field." Corinne leaned closer, studying the precise line of the old wound. "But this isn't a surgical removal. Look at how jagged it is at the edges." Ellison nodded grimly. "Someone cut it out in a hurry. They were afraid of whatever Kestrel was carrying." The implications settled heavily between them. The burned observation post, the missing camera card, and now this crude surgery, all pieces of a puzzle they were only beginning to understand. "We need to document this," Ellison said, pulling out his phone again. He took several detailed photos of the scar while Corinne kept watch, her eyes scanning the shadows between the parked cars. "What do we do now?" she asked when he finished. "First, we file a police report about the attack. Then we need to figure out what was in that pouch, and why someone was willing to kill to get it." Kestrel stood between them, his posture alert but calm. Despite the violence he'd just displayed on the bridge, his eyes were clear and focused. He'd protected them, Corinne realized, just as he'd been protecting something else when he first found her in that storm. The emergency room doors slid open, spilling fluorescent light across the parking lot. A nurse stepped out, clipboard in hand, responding to Ellison's earlier call. As they walked toward the entrance, Corinne felt the weight of what they'd discovered settling onto her shoulders. The attack on the bridge had made it clear. They were no longer just following a mystery. They were threatening someone's carefully buried secrets, and that someone was willing to kill to keep those secrets hidden. The morning sun cast long shadows across the smoke jumper's kitchen table, where maps and documents lay spread out. Cal Reeves, the retired firefighter, traced weathered fingers over the cloth strip's faded numbers, while Corinne and Ellison watched intently. "We were reading it wrong," Cal said, his voice gravelly from years of smoke exposure. "These aren't standard grid coordinates. They're using an old fire district system. Changes everything." He reached for a yellowed map, its corners curling with age. Corinne leaned forward, her hands pressed flat against the table. How so? See these first numbers? Cal tapped the cloth. That's an elevation marker. Whatever this points to, it's higher up than we thought, above Bracken's ranchlands, in the dry wash area. Ellison pulled out his phone, comparing Cal's map to current satellite imagery. There's an access road that gets within a mile. We could hike the rest. Kestrel, who had been lying quietly in the corner, lifted his head at the mention of hiking. His ears pricked forward, showing the same focused attention he'd displayed when they'd found the hidden key. I'm coming with you, Cal said, already reaching for his boots. Those caves up there can be tricky. Easy to get turned around. They took Cal's truck, its suspension better suited to the rough terrain. As they climbed higher into the hills, Corinne noticed how the vegetation changed, scrubby pines giving way to bare rock and tough desert plants. The air grew thinner, making each breath feel shallow. When the road became too rough to continue, they parked in the shadow of a boulder. Kestrel jumped down from the truck bed, nose already working the air. His behavior had shifted subtly, more purposeful, less watchful. He knows this place, Ellison said quietly. They followed the wolf dog's lead, picking their way carefully across the rocky ground. The sun beat down mercilessly, but a cool breeze whispered through the canyons. After about 20 minutes of hiking, Cal held up his hand. Hold up, he said, pointing to a dark opening in the rock face ahead. That's not on any of my maps. The cave mouth was partially hidden by a fall of loose rock, but it was clearly man-made or at least modified. Tool marks scored the walls where the opening had been widened. As they drew closer, Corinne caught the faint but unmistakable scent of old smoke. Kestrel moved with increasing urgency now, leading them into the shadows. Ellison clicked on his flashlight, the beam cutting through the darkness. The air grew cooler as they ventured deeper, their footsteps echoing slightly. The cave opened into a larger chamber, and Corinne's breath caught in her throat. Against the far wall stood a crude but sturdy pen, built from heavy timber and metal bars. It was roughly 8 feet by 8 feet, with a solid roof and a barred door that hung slightly ajar. Jesus, Cal muttered, running his light over the construction. Ellison moved closer to examine the pen, while Corinne took pictures with trembling hands. The construction was professional. Someone had taken time to build this properly, meant it to last. Over here, Ellison called, his voice tight. He was studying one of the support beams, where something had been scratched into the wood. There's a name, Tommy, and a date. Corinne's camera flashed as she documented the crude inscription. The date sent a chill through her. It was weeks after the county had officially called off their search for the missing ranch hand's son, declaring it exhaustive and complete. Look at this, Cal said, examining the pen's door. There, burned deep into the wood, was Bracken's distinctive brand, the same mark that adorned his prize cattle. Kestrel padded forward, nose working the air. He sniffed at the door's latch mechanism, then turned to Corinne. With deliberate movement, he dropped the brass key they'd found under the floorboard at her feet. The sound of metal hitting stone seemed to echo in the cave's stillness. He's making sure we understand, Ellison said softly. This is what he was trying to show us all along. Corinne picked up the key with latex gloves she'd brought just in case. It was small but heavy, the kind used in high-security locks. She photographed it next to the latch for scale. We need to document everything, she said, forcing her voice to remain steady. Every detail, every measurement, the brand, the construction method, the date, especially that date. They worked methodically, Cal's experience with investigation scenes proving invaluable. They measured and photographed every aspect of the pen, noting tool marks and wear patterns that might indicate how long it had been used. Ellison collected trace evidence, fragments of rope, some scattered straw, anything that might help build their case. The air grew heavier with each discovery. This wasn't just evidence of a crime. It was proof of a calculated operation. Someone had invested time and resources to create this hidden prison, marked it with their brand like a possession, and trusted that its remote location would keep their secrets safe. "The smoke smell," Cal said suddenly, examining the cave's ceiling. "There's no natural ventilation here. They must have used some kind of portable heater during winter. See those soot marks?" Corinne photographed the ceiling stains, her mind struggling to process the implications. Someone had maintained this place through the seasons, keeping their prisoner alive but hidden. The level of planning was chilling. Kestrel remained near the pen's door, his posture alert but calmer than Corinne had seen him since finding him in that storm. He'd completed his mission, delivering them to this evidence, confirming its significance with the key. Whatever had happened here, he'd been part of it, perhaps as a guard dog who'd turned against his masters when he witnessed their cruelty. They spent over an hour documenting everything, working in near silence. The weight of what they'd discovered pressed down on them like the mountain itself. This wasn't just about a missing child anymore. It was about systematic evil, hidden in plain sight behind Bracken's respected name and carefully maintained power. "We need to be smart about how we handle this," Ellison said as they prepared to leave. "If we take this to the wrong people, it'll disappear," Corinne finished. "Just like the camera card, just like the evidence pouch they cut out of Kestrel." They made their way back to Cal's truck, each lost in their own thoughts. The sun was high now, baking the rocks and creating shimmer waves in the distance. Below them, Bracken's ranch lands spread out like a green patchwork, looking deceptively peaceful from this height. Corinne secured her camera in its padded case, knowing the photos it contained could shatter the valley's carefully maintained facade. The crude inscription of Tommy's name burned in her mind, a child's desperate mark on the world, proof that he had existed, had suffered, had waited for rescue long after the official search declared him gone. Corinne's motel room felt smaller than usual, with 3 adults huddled around her tiny kitchen table. The late afternoon sun slanted through dusty Venetian blinds, casting striped shadows across their worried faces. Empty coffee cups and scattered papers covered the worn Formica surface as they pieced together the puzzle that Kestrel had led them to. "So he didn't just wander into that storm by accident," Corinne said, absently rubbing her temples. "He escaped, probably during a guard change or a moment of carelessness, but instead of just running, he went back for that key first." Ellison nodded, his expression thoughtful. "And then he chose you specifically, Corinne. Out of all the people he could have approached that night, he picked someone who would notice the details, someone who wouldn't give up easily. Someone who'd fight for what's right," Cal added quietly. The weight of Kestrel's trust settled over Corinne. She looked across the room to where the animal lay near the door, his watchful eyes never leaving their group. Even now, he was guarding them, protecting their discussion of justice and truth. "We need to be smart about this," Ellison continued, spreading out their rough map of the area. "Bracken's got too many connections in local law enforcement. If we take this evidence straight to them, it could disappear before we can build a proper case." Cal leaned forward, his weathered hands tracing the route to the cave. "What we need is to catch them in the act, get them to reveal themselves somehow." A plan began forming in Corinne's mind. What if we could make them think there was still evidence up there? Something they missed? "The camera housing," Ellison said, catching on. "The one that was ripped open." Exactly. Corinne felt energy coursing through her veins, the kind that came with finally seeing a path forward. What if we let it slip that the memory card wasn't completely destroyed? That some of the footage might be recoverable? Cal scratched his chin thoughtfully. They'd have to check it out. They couldn't risk leaving that kind of evidence floating around. I might know someone who could help with that, Ellison said. He pulled out his phone and stepped into the kitchen for privacy. While he made his call, Corinne studied the gathering clouds through the window. Dark thunderheads were building over the hills, nature's own pressure system moving in to match the tension in the room. The storm would provide good cover, but it also meant they needed to move quickly. Ellison returned, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. Remember Jenny, the night dispatcher? She's willing to help. Says she can drop a casual mention about this memory card on an open frequency, one she knows Bracken's crew monitors. Will they buy it? Cal asked. Jenny's good at making things sound unintentional, Ellison assured them. She'll make it seem like she's trying to be discreet, but accidentally left the channel open. Something about the forensics team requesting equipment to recover data from a damaged memory card found near the old fire tower. Corinne began gathering supplies, her movements precise and purposeful. She pulled a coil of rope from her emergency car kit, checked that her phone was fully charged, and added a backup battery pack. The brass key went into a secure inner pocket of her jacket. We should have basic medical supplies, Ellison said, returning to his truck for his field kit, and extra flashlights with fresh batteries. Cal studied the weather through the window. That storm's moving fast. 2, maybe 3 hours before it hits. We need to be in position well before then. Corinne called her neighbor, arranging for Amos and Tilda to stay there for dinner and homework. She kept her voice casual, not wanting to worry her children, but her heart ached at the thought of them possibly being in danger. This was why she had to see this through, to make their world safer, to show them that justice was possible even against powerful men like Bracken. The group spent the next hour planning their approach. They would take separate vehicles, park in different locations, maintain radio silence except for emergencies. Cal would watch the main access road while Ellison covered the old forest service track. Corinne and Kestrel would wait near the cave itself, hidden but ready to document whatever happened. Remember, Cal warned as they did a final equipment check, these people are desperate. They've already tried to run you off the road once. They won't hesitate to use force if they feel cornered. Corinne patted the bear spray on her belt, a last resort defense she hoped she wouldn't need. We just need to document them investigating the camera site. That proves they knew about it, proves they had something to hide. Jenny's voice crackled over Ellison's radio, right on schedule. Her tone was perfectly casual as she mentioned the forensics team's request, then made a show of fumbling with buttons before the channel went quiet. The trap was set. Thunder rolled in the distance as they made their final preparations. Corinne looked at her unlikely team, a veterinarian who'd found his courage, a retired smoke jumper who still believed in justice, and a remarkable animal who'd chosen her to help right a terrible wrong. The storm was coming, but they were ready. Kestrel stood by the door, his posture alert but calm. He'd brought them this far, guided them to the truth. Now it was their turn to see it through. Time to go, Cal said softly. They moved out one by one, careful not to leave together. The thunderheads loomed darker over the hills, and a cool wind carried the smell of rain. Soon the storm would provide their cover, and Bracken's men would have to make their move. Corinne touched the key in her pocket one last time before climbing into her car. They had the truth. They had their plan, and they had each other. Sometimes, she reflected, that was enough to change everything. The first heavy drops began to fall as they drove toward the hills, each taking their separate routes to their designated positions. The trap was set, the storm was rolling in, and justice was finally within reach. The evening settled into an uneasy quiet as Corinne and Ellison crouched behind a rocky outcrop near the cave entrance. They had arrived 30 minutes early, using the deepening darkness and approaching storm as cover. Kestrel lay flat beside them, his body tense but motionless. Thunder rolled in the distance, and Corinne pulled her jacket tighter against the rising wind. The air felt electric, charged with both the coming storm and their own carefully laid trap. She checked her phone again. Full battery, camera ready. Everything hinged on capturing irrefutable evidence. "Movement," Ellison whispered, touching her arm. Headlights swept across the wash below, cutting through the gathering gloom. The black pickup they'd come to recognize crawled up the access road, its engine sound muffled by the wind. Behind it, a second vehicle followed. An SUV she hadn't seen before. Corinne's heart hammered against her ribs as she activated her phone's camera. Beside her, Ellison readied his own device. They needed multiple angles, backup footage in case something went wrong. They couldn't risk missing this. The vehicles parked in a staggered formation that partially blocked the view from below. Smart. Professional. These weren't amateurs covering their tracks. This was a practiced routine. Ludo Cass emerged from the pickup first, his broad shoulders hunched against the wind. He moved with purpose toward the cave entrance, fumbling briefly with a ring of keys. The brass key they'd found, the one Kestrel had led them to, had been just one piece of a larger set. The second vehicle's doors opened, releasing two more figures into the darkness. They carried flashlights but kept them pointed downward, conscious of being visible from the valley below. Corinne zoomed her camera in carefully, making sure to capture their faces when they turned. Lightning flashed, briefly illuminating the scene in stark detail. Corinne counted, 1,000, 2 1,000, until the thunder followed. The storm was moving closer, but they still had time. Ludo reached the pen inside the cave, his movements sure and practiced. The lock clicked open with familiar ease. This wasn't his first visit. He knew exactly what he was doing, where everything was. Corinne's camera recorded it all. The casual confidence, the routine nature of his actions. This was damning evidence of long-term involvement. "Got it," he called softly to his companions. "Bring the light." One of the men trained a flashlight on the pen as Ludo dragged out a sealed wooden crate. It wasn't large, maybe 3 feet by 2 feet, but he handled it with notable care. The wood bore the same brand mark they'd documented earlier, Bracken's distinctive cattle iron. Corinne's fingers trembled slightly as she zoomed in tighter. The frame captured everything they needed. Ludo's face, clear and recognizable, the branded crate, the pen's interior with its scratched beam. A perfect chain of custody, proving who had access and control. For one crystalline moment, victory seemed within reach. They had faces, actions, and physical evidence all documented. This would be enough for a proper investigation, enough to force the authorities to act. Then the sky split open. A brilliant fork of lightning struck the drought-parched brush higher up the canyon. The flash was so close it left purple after-images dancing in Corinne's vision. The thunder crashed almost simultaneously, rattling loose stones. In the sudden illumination, she saw what the wind had been doing. Sparks from the lightning strike were already catching in the dry vegetation, and the strong gusts were driving them downhill, straight toward them. Kestrel's hackles rose, a low growl vibrating in his chest. The animal's instincts were screaming danger from multiple directions now, the fire, the men, the storm itself. Corinne touched Ellison's arm, signaling that they needed to withdraw. They had their evidence. There was no sense risking everything by staying too long. But as she shifted her weight to begin their retreat, loose gravel skittered beneath her boot. The sound was small, nearly lost in the wind. But Ludo's head snapped up like a predator catching a scent. His flashlight beam swept the rocks, searching. Corinne pressed herself flatter against the stone, feeling her heart pound. Ellison's hand found hers in the darkness, squeezing once, reassurance or warning, she wasn't sure which. Above them, the first flames were beginning to dance through the brush, driven by the strengthening wind. Kestrel remained absolutely still beside them, but his muscles were coiled tight, ready to move. The animal's focus wasn't on the fire or the storm, but on Ludo, as if he remembered their last violent encounter on the bridge. Another flash of lightning illuminated the scene, closer this time. In that instant of harsh light, Corinne saw Ludo's expression change from suspicion to recognition. The flashlight beam steadied on their position as he reached toward his belt with his free hand. The wind howled down the canyon, carrying with it the first acrid taste of smoke. They were out of time in more ways than one. Behind them, flames were beginning to catch in the dry brush. Before them, Ludo was moving up the slope with deadly purpose. Caught between fire and human threat, Corinne clutched her phone tighter. They had the evidence they'd come for. Proof of Bracken's operation. Proof of Ludo's involvement. Proof that would finally force action from legitimate authorities. But first, they had to survive the next few minutes. Thunder boomed again, and the first heavy raindrops began to fall. But the wind was driving the flames faster than the rain could douse them. Smoke was starting to fill the canyon, reducing visibility and making every breath more difficult. Ludo's flashlight beam cut through the thickening air, searching methodically. He knew someone was up there now. The question was whether he would find them before the fire forced everyone to retreat. Corinne felt Ellison shift slightly beside her, positioning himself to move. Kestrel remained eerily still, waiting. The storm's full fury was about to break, and with it, this fragile moment of stalemate would shatter. The rain began to fall harder as Ludo's light swept closer to their position. The beam caught the edge of their rocky shelter, inches from discovery. Smoke swirled thicker around them, and the sound of approaching flames grew louder. They were running out of options and running out of time. The storm broke with explosive force. Lightning ripped across the sky in jagged branches, illuminating the canyon in stark flashes of white-hot light. Thunder crashed overhead, so close it vibrated in Corinne's chest. The wind howled through the wash, whipping smoke and the first heavy raindrops into stinging curtains. Ludo's flashlight beam wavered in the chaos. He stumbled slightly on the uneven ground, cursing as he tried to keep his footing. In his frustration, he turned and kicked the wooden crate hard. The impact sent it tumbling, and the worn lid splintered apart. Corinne's breath caught in her throat. In the intermittent flashes of lightning, she saw a small figure curled inside. The boy was thin, painfully so, his clothes hanging loose on his frame. But he was alive. His chest rose and fell with shallow breaths, his eyes squinting against the sudden light. "Oh God," Ellison whispered beside her, the words barely audible over the storm. The sound carried just far enough. Ludo's head snapped toward their position, and his hand moved with practiced speed. The gun seemed to materialize in his grip, pointing toward the shadows where they crouched. Kestrel moved like a ghost. One moment he was still beside them. The next, he was airborne, a dark missile launching through the smoke. His teeth flashed in another lightning strike as he crashed into Ludo's arm. The gun discharged with a crack that echoed off the canyon walls. Ellison jerked beside Corinne, a sharp intake of breath hissing through his teeth. She smelled copper under the smoke and rain, blood spreading across his shoulder where the bullet had grazed him. "Ward!" She reached for him, but he shook his head. "Just a scratch. The boy. Get the boy." The fire was spreading faster now, despite the rain. Smoke funneled down the wash like water, thick and choking. The storm's downdraft was driving the flames toward them, creating a wind tunnel of heat and ash. Corinne scrambled down the slope, her boots sliding on rain-slick rocks. The boy was trying to push himself up, movements weak and uncoordinated. Up close, she could see the toll of his captivity. Hollow cheeks, dark circles under his eyes, skin pale from too long underground. "I've got you," she said, wrapping an arm around his thin shoulders. "Can you walk?" He nodded, though his legs trembled as she helped him stand. Behind them, Ludo was shouting into a radio, his words broken by coughing and Kestrel's relentless attacks. The animal moved like Smoke himself, darting in to snap and slash before dancing away from Ludo's wild swings. "Base, we've got intruders at Site 3. Send Jesus!" Another snarl from Kestrel cut him off. The drainage path was their best chance, a natural channel that would lead them down and away from the growing inferno. But the rain was making the ground treacherous. Rocks shifted and crumbled under Corinne's feet as she half-carried, half-dragged the boy toward safety. Ellison caught up to them, his left arm held tight against his body. Blood had soaked through his shirt sleeve, but his eyes were clear and focused. He took the boy's other side, helping to steady him as they picked their way down the slope. The smoke was getting thicker, stinging Corinne's eyes and making her throat burn. She could hear the fire now, a hungry roar that seemed to be chasing them down the canyon. The rain wasn't enough to stop it, only adding steam to the choking mix of smoke and ash. Behind them, Ludo's curses turned to screams of rage. Kestrel was giving them the time they needed, keeping their pursuer off balance and angry. The animal's snarls were continuous now, a sound of pure fury that matched the storm's violence. "Keep moving," Ellison urged as the boy stumbled. "We're almost to level ground." Lightning flashed again, and Corinne saw the path ahead disappear into a wall of smoke. The wind was driving everything, fire, rain, and debris, into the natural funnel of the wash. They were running out of clear air and time. Rocks continued to give way beneath their feet, sending small avalanches of gravel skittering down the slope. Each step was a gamble between speed and stability. The boy was trying his best to help, but his strength was fading fast. The sound of the fire grew louder, drowning out even the thunder. Corinne could feel its heat on her back now, an angry presence pushing them faster down the treacherous path. Her lungs burned with each breath, and sweat mixed with rain on her face. Through the chaos, Kestrel's snarls remained constant, their guardian angel with teeth and fury, buying them precious seconds with each attack. Ludo's shouts became more desperate, his threats dissolving into pure animal fear as the fire closed in on all of them. The boy suddenly sagged between them, his legs giving out completely. Ellison grimaced as he took more of the weight on, his injured side. They couldn't stop, not here, not now. The fire was too close, the smoke too thick. "Just a little further," Corinne promised, though she could barely see the path ahead through the stinging haze. "Hold on, please, just hold on." Another lightning strike illuminated their desperate descent. Through the curtain of rain and smoke, Corinne caught glimpses of the inferno above, a wall of orange and red that seemed to reach for them with burning fingers. The storm's fury and the fire's hunger had combined into something apocalyptic, turning the canyon into a vision of hell itself. A wailing sound cut through the storm's chaos, flood sirens echoing off the canyon walls, their warning merging with rolling thunder. Corinne's heart lurched. Flash floods were the desert's deadliest surprise, turning dry washes into raging rivers in minutes. The first surge of water hit their ankles, brown and angry. The boy pressed closer to her chest, his breathing ragged with fear. Above them, The fire continued its relentless advance, pushing them toward the rising water. A massive crack split the air as a burning tree limb crashed down the slope. Kestrel, still harrying Ludo's retreat, couldn't dodge fast enough. The branch pinned his foreleg, and before anyone could move, a wall of muddy water swept through the wash. The animal disappeared under the churning flood, claws scrabbling desperately against smooth rock. "Kestrel!" Corinne screamed. The dog's head broke surface briefly before going under again. They were trapped on a narrow ledge now, the water rising rapidly below them. Ellison's face was ghost white from blood loss, his injured arm hanging useless. Ludo had found higher ground, but he was advancing along the canyon wall, murder in his eyes despite the chaos surrounding them. The boy trembled against her, his tears hot on her neck even through the rain. The ledge under their feet was slick with mud, offering barely enough space to stand. Water or fire. The choice was closing in fast, and neither promised survival. But Corinne couldn't forget what Kestrel had done for them. The animal had chosen her, trusted her to help expose the truth. He'd protected her children, saved them on the bridge, and now he was drowning because he'd stayed to fight their battle. Her hand found the knotted motel bedsheet in her pack, brought for climbing but now their only lifeline. With shaking fingers, she secured it around a sturdy root protruding from the canyon wall. "Take him," she said to Ellison, carefully transferring the boy's weight. "Get to higher ground. I have to try." "Corinne, no!" Ellison's good arm gripped her sleeve. "The current's too strong." The water was rising faster now, turning the wash into a churning rapid. Somewhere in that muddy torrent, Kestrel was fighting for his life. The same fierce loyalty that had driven him to protect them now demanded an answer. "I can't leave him," she said simply. "Not after everything." Ludo's shape loomed closer through the rain and smoke. Time was running out. Corinne checked the knot one final time, took a deep breath, and prepared to dive into the flood. The water roared below her, promising no mercy for mistakes. Thunder cracked overhead, and in that moment of brilliant lightning, she saw everything with crystal clarity. The boy's terrified face, Ellison's anguished concern, Ludo's approaching menace, and somewhere in the churning water, a loyal partner who had risked everything to bring justice to light. The ledge crumbled slightly under her feet, sending pebbles into the torrent below. The flood sirens wailed their continuous warning, but Corinne had already made her choice. Some debts could only be repaid with equal courage. The icy water shocked Corinne's system as she plunged into the flood. The current immediately tried to tear her away, but her fingers kept their death grip on the knotted bedsheet. The muddy torrent pulled at her clothes, threatening to drag her under, but she fought against it, kicking hard toward where she'd last seen Kestrel. The fallen branch thrashed in the current, Kestrel's trapped form barely visible beneath it. Corinne's lungs burned as she reached the spot, one hand finding purchase on the rough bark. She pulled herself closer, fighting the water's relentless push. Kestrel's eyes met hers, still alert despite his desperate situation. Above them, Ellison balanced precariously on the ledge, the rescued boy tucked against his good side. With his injured arm, he held Corinne's phone steady, its camera trained on Ludo. The enforcer's threats carried over the storm's fury, each word now preserved as evidence. Corinne wrapped the sheet around her waist, freeing both hands to work. The branch's weight pressed Kestrel's leg against the creek bed. She dug her fingers underneath, trying to create space, but it wouldn't budge. The current kept shoving her sideways, each movement a battle for control. Police sirens echoed closer through the canyon, their wail mixing with the storm. Corinne braced herself against a rock, and began sawing the bedsheet against the branch where it pinned Kestrel. The fabric caught and pulled, slowly wearing through the water-softened wood. "It's streaming live to dispatch," Ellison's voice carried over the chaos. "Every threat, every move, they're watching right now." The branch finally splintered. Kestrel kicked free, and Corinne grabbed his scruff, using the sheet to haul them both toward the bank. The animal scrambled up beside her, favoring his injured leg but standing firm, positioning himself between them and Ludo. The enforcer's face twisted as he calculated his options. The sirens grew louder, and Ellison's words about the live feed sank in. With a final snarled curse, Ludo turned and disappeared up the trail, choosing his boss's freedom over revenge. Through sheets of rain, headlights cut across the canyon as a gleaming black SUV pulled up. Royce Bracken emerged, his expensive ranch coat already soaked. His practiced smile faltered as he took in the scene. His foreman cornered, a missing boy alive and cameras recording everything. "Now, folks, there's clearly been some kind of misunderstanding here," Bracken started, but his smooth words died as state patrol vehicles crested the ridge, their red and blue lights painting the wet rocks. Corinne held her phone steady, the live feed still running as she nodded toward the branded pen. "No misunderstanding, Mr. Bracken. Your mark is right there on that door where you kept him." The rescued boy, still pressed against Ellison's side, pointed a shaking finger at the brand. His voice came out barely above a whisper. "That's it. That's the mark I saw every day." The troopers moved with efficient precision, cuffing Ludo first as they secured the scene. One officer spoke into his radio, coordinating with teams at the ranch. Within minutes, confirmation crackled back. They'd found the fire investigators' burned badge hidden in Bracken's tack room, exactly where the grid coordinates had suggested. "Royce Bracken, you're under arrest," the lead trooper announced, reading him his rights as silver handcuffs clicked shut around the rancher's wrists. The man's carefully constructed facade crumbled, replaced by cold fury as he was led away. Beside Corinne, Kestrel pressed against her leg, his fur still dripping from the flood. She could feel him trembling, but his posture remained vigilant. Below them, the floodwater continued its rush through the canyon, though the storm's fury was finally beginning to fade. Dawn light pierced the breaking clouds, illuminating justice long delayed but finally served. The autumn sun cast long shadows across the Lyles' small front yard as Corinne watched Amos work with Kestrel. Her 15-year-old son's hands moved with growing confidence through the series of commands that once seemed so strange. The wolfdog responded with perfect precision, his amber eyes fixed on the boy who had finally opened his heart to trust again. "Good boy, Kestrel," Amos said, a smile breaking across his face as he reached down to scratch behind the animal's ears. The court order making Kestrel 7 officially theirs had arrived 3 weeks ago, thick with official stamps and bearing the judge's signature. It felt like the final piece clicking into place. Inside, Tilda sat cross-legged on the living room floor, carefully arranging items in a wooden shadow box she'd decorated herself. The brass key that had started their journey lay nestled against dark velvet, beside a photograph of Kestrel sitting protectively next to the rescued boy in the hospital. Her daughter had insisted on adding pressed wildflowers from the canyon, transforming evidence into art. The phone rang, Dr. Ward Ellison calling to confirm dinner plans for Saturday. His shoulder was healing well, the bullet graze leaving only a small scar to mark that rainy night of courage. His invitation had come, wrapped in awkward thanks and shy glances, but Corinne had found herself saying yes without hesitation. Some doors, once opened, felt right to walk through. "Mom, look!" Tilda called from inside. "I finished it." Corinne stepped away from the doorway, Kestrel padding silently beside her. The shadow box was beautiful, a testament to darkness overcome and light preserved. Just like the motel job she'd kept, the small house they'd made home, and the family that had grown stronger through trial, it represented something earned through grit and grace. Standing there, watching Amos join them inside as evening settled over the valley, Corinne realized she hadn't just protected something bright for her children. In choosing courage over fear, truth over safety, she had become the light they needed. Justice had been served, yes, but this quiet evening held something more precious, the promise of new beginnings, hard-won and enduring. Kestrel's warm presence against her leg reminded her that sometimes the best gifts come disguised as challenges, and sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply open your door to possibility and trust in the goodness waiting to walk through. Thanks for watching. If any part of this story lingered with you, consider subscribing. I'll be here again tomorrow, sharing another tale that speaks to the soul.